What is going on, everyone? Welcome in to our next top 10 positional breakdown video for the 2023 NFL Draft. Today we're going to be talking about a loaded edge class. This group is so deep. There are going to be day two players, potential starters in the NFL that we don't even cover in this video. So it is important that I let you know that if some of those players aren't on this list that you were looking forward to hearing me talk about, you want to know my thoughts on those guys, or if you want to know who those guys are, well, you can get access to my full draft rankings on my Patreon. That is patreon.com/thatfranchiseguy. I've got 24 edge players evaluated at this point in time. That list is growing, and that's just this position. You can get access to my write-ups, grades, rankings on every player in this class. We're going to have upwards of 400 players completely evaluated come April's draft. Additionally, if you enjoy my draft content, you will get even more of it over there on Patreon with film breakdowns and a team-specific 7-round mock draft for all 32 teams in April. Everything I do in this channel would not be possible without my amazing supporters on Patreon. So you can join Patreon gang, get that exclusive content, and support my channel in the process. We're going to get into it here, but first, if you could continue to support my channel there by taking a second to hit that like button down below. It's a free and easy way to support my channel. It really helps out, tells YouTube you enjoy the content, and to push it out to other NFL fans like you. And make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any more positional breakdowns and other draft content like mock drafts and stuff heading your way very soon. All right, let's get started with my number 10 edge player, and that is going to be Tua Tagovailoa out of USC. He was a really interesting evaluation because he was listed at like 6'4", 294 pounds on USC's roster, and most boards had him as an interior player. Well, let me clarify the air there. He's not an interior player. In fact, on film, he played edge and looked more like 265 to me. Sure enough, he shows up at the combine and weighs in at 266 pounds. So this is an edge player, and he's a unique type of rusher. I mean, he is a big, strong guy. He does defend the run and that sort of expectation, if you will. But as a rusher, he's not a true power guy. He can, you know, get behind his pads and he has a good first step. But really, where he wins the most as a rusher is with his quickness. He's got those really strong hands to actually swipe away the arms of pass protectors. And then he's got really quick feet at his size to kind of dance in and around blocks. It helps him win with inside-outside swim moves. It helps him win with a rip-to-bend move around the edge where, for a bigger guy, or at least a thicker guy, he actually shows solid bend. So, you know, he wins in a lot of different ways as a rusher. He's not the most explosive athlete. He just isn't. He didn't test at the combine, and I don't think he would have tested all that well. But I do think he can be an effective number 2 rusher someday at the next level, and he's going to be a solid run defender as well. So I like his floor, but the one thing that really stood out to me about Tua Tagovailoa that really caught my eye is in the second half of the season at USC, they started letting him line up as a rush linebacker. And in an identical way to those that have watched Zadarius Smith in the NFL, who also is 6'4", 270 pounds, was a 4th-round pick himself. And I'm not saying Tua Tagovailoa is going to be an all-pro player like Zadarius Smith, but yes, Zadarius is good as an outside rusher, but he wouldn't be racking up 80 pressure, 15 sack seasons if teams like the Packers and Vikings didn't let him line up in between the tackles as a stand-up rush linebacker, where that combination of quickness and instincts and strong, rapid hands to just work and dance inside and around these guards and centers that just can't hang with that skill set, that can really increase his ceiling. So if you are the team that drafts him, you would be dumb not to experiment with him in those rush packages. Jadeveon Clowney's another guy that's had a lot of success in those types of roles going back to his prime in Houston. So if you draft him, look for your team to hopefully have seen that in his scouting profile, that he's really instinctive. Not everyone can do that, but if you can, it can be a disruptive way to rush the passer. So I see a high floor player who, worst case scenario, is going to be an outstanding number 3 rotational piece who can come in potentially in those rush linebacker situations in your dime looks and defend the run on early downs. And that's just a really good football player to get into your building. I think 2nd or 3rd round is a good spot for Tui Pelotu. Next up, I have Felix Okafor out of Kansas State. And man, he is one of the craftiest, toughest edge players in this class. Another guy that really isn't a great athlete, another guy that didn't test at the combine, and I don't think he would have all that well. So you are going to have some obvious ceiling limitations with a player like that, or at least expected ceiling limitations. But that said, he might understand how to rush the passer better than anyone in this class. Honestly, he talked about it at his interview, or his podium interview at the combine, where he loves to set things up with the bull rush and then really work off of that. And it shows on film that him doing that exact same thing. He backed it up on tape. And he just, it's one thing to know what moves you have. It's another thing to know when to use those moves. And he's just so instinctive to know the leverage points of the tackles, what techniques tackles are trying to use to beat him, and what he can use to counter against those things. And you just don't see that a lot from a lot of pass rushers, let alone a true junior. Now, again, he isn't the most powerful guy. He doesn't really have that natural ability to come from a wide alignment and convert speed to power. He is a powerful rusher, but he's not going to be Rashawn Gary or Marcus Davenport at the next level. And he's not the quickest guy either, so you're not going to see him breaking out a million spin moves or swim moves. It's much more of that slow burn as a rusher that I'm describing, and that ability to just consistently work towards the quarterback and get through his blocker. So I don't ever see him being a number 1 edge guy. But the other thing is, I think he can be a fantastic run defender at the next level. It's a little bit of an interesting projection for him because he played in one of those weird Big 12 style 3-3-5 defenses where he's playing as kind of a 4-eye inside shade, not playing from that traditional 5-tech alignment that he's going to play at the next level. So he's seeing a lot more double teams, just playing a position that it's a very tough ask. And he held up with a ton of physicality and as well as he could have, but there's only so much he can do in that assignment at 255 pounds. Now, at the next level, with good coaching, and if he can just kind of throw out everything he was taught at TCU on how to defend the run, I see a guy that can be a plus run defender at the next level. My pro comp for him is Jabal Sheard, no longer in the league, but he was a nice number 2 player, had some really good years for the Patriots, the Colts, I believe. He may have even made an all-pro team. I'm not entirely sure, but he reminds me of that kind of player where he's not the most ridiculous athlete in the world, but he's big and strong and just a constant presence on your D-line as a number 2 guy. And here we are with my number 9 edge rusher as a true 2nd round grade. So that's a good perspective on how deep this class is. Next up, I have Derek Hall out of Auburn, a unique profile at 6'3", 255 pounds, decent size. He's not the biggest guy in the world, but 34.5-inch arms. So he's coming in from a low leverage point, and he's got these lengthy arms. And I got to see him in person at the Senior Bowl. I'm telling you, these aren't typical lanky 34.5-inch arms for a 255-pound guy. He is ripped, and he has a good first step. He has good hand placement with those arms, and that gives him the perfect profile to be an effective bull rusher at the next level. He can lean in with a 1-arm, long arm bull rush. He can go 2 arms, push and pull off of that. He can push and swim off of it. He taps into that side of his game with really a bull rushing profile. And it made him an effective rusher at Auburn, and it's going to make him an effective rusher at the next level. Now, he's a little bit of a hip tight in terms of the bend isn't really there. He can win with inside counters, but it's got to be very much one cut set up by the threat of the outside rush with a rip to bend move that he loves to go to as well. But you're not going to see him, pulling off crazy spin moves or anything too dramatic in terms of athletic ability. And I will say that stiffness in space does at times make it easy for the quarterbacks to do just a little sidestep and he'll go flying by, and he can struggle to tackle in space as well. So you do see some of that hip tightness show up as a problem for him, but that power profile as a rusher will play at the next level. I think he has the upside of a number 2 guy. And the other thing is he's just not a good run defender. He could be with his length and strength profile, but he really struggles to use his eyes. And I don't know if it's because he is a little bit shorter. He has a hard time seeing over tackles, but time and time again, I felt like ball carriers were just going right through him in his lane, or he just wasn't processing the run well. Like, he can set the edge and stuff, but that's really about it. So I don't know if that's ever going to be a strength in his game. I just didn't see the instincts there. And for all those reasons, I compare him to Frank Clark, and that's pretty high praise. Again, this is a very good draft class. But Frank Clark has been an overrated player for a while. He's been paid like a number 1, but he has not played like a number 1. In a situation where Frank Clark was rightfully paid $12, $13, $14 million a year, this comp might make a lot more sense. But Frank Clark is a good number 2 rusher, even though he's had to be the number 1 edge for the Chiefs. But it's worked because they've had Chris Jones as their number 1. And Clark is just not a very consistent run defender either. So I actually really like that comp. They're similar sizes. And I think as far as what you're going to get at the next level, I think it's going to be pretty damn close. I really like Derek Hall, even if he is my 8th edge guy. Now, you will see that Keion White is not going to make this list. I don't buy it. I don't buy that this incredible athletic ability from this 24-year-old guy that didn't even work out at the combine is going to translate to be this first-round guy that's going to be this great number 1 edge guy. I'll just leave it at that. He's not going to make this list. Again, you can check my Patreon to see my write-up on him and some of these other guys that don't make it. You can also check out my podcast, The Fully Inflated Football Show. We talked about him as a combine loser in this week's show. That link is in the description below. But my number 7 edge player is Will McDonald out of Iowa State. And over the years of doing this, I've come to learn that players like Will McDonald are very easy fan favorites. Guys with that speed, bend, profile. I don't know if it's the Madden player in all of us or if these guys happen to have more exciting highlight reels or anything, but here we are again. Will McDonald is getting a lot of love in this draft class. I'm not saying that isn't warranted, but I do think that lack of a power profile with him is a deficiency in his game. He's only 240 pounds. Now, he absolutely has that speed to bend profile. He's got one of the best get-offs in this class. I think he's right there with Will Anderson and some of the top guys in this class as far as true bend. So there's reps where he'll come off the ball and just warp around the tackle before they can even get their hands on him. And he uniquely has 35-inch arms. So that helps him distance himself from those tackles who are trying to get their hands on him. He has a very unique physical profile. Now, there's 3 holdups with me with Will McDonald. Number 1 is, like I said, he just doesn't have a huge power profile. If he comes from a wide alignment, there are going to be bigger, stronger, dominant tackles in the NFL. When Will McDonald tries to bull rush them, they're going to just kind of latch on and laugh because he's just not very big, right? So he's got to win with that speed profile. Number 2 with him is he played in Iowa State's stupid system, honestly. I mean, I know they've had success and college football is just a weird thing, but he played a 4-eye technique in their 3-3-5 system. Very rarely was he asked to actually line up from the outside and rush the passer in the same way that he will be asked to do at the next level. And that's not so much a concern. I think that has its pros and cons, but the production profile isn't fully there with him because he didn't get those opportunities. But if you look at true pass rush snaps per PFF, Will McDonald received about half of the true pass rush snaps as all the guys on this list. However, he was second in all of Power 5 football in pass rush win rate in those situations, 48%. Literally, when he got a true opportunity to go one-on-one with a tackle, he was unblockable. That is better than Will Anderson, Tyree Wilson, anybody in this draft outside of, I think it was someone on USC, not Tui Pelotu, or maybe it was UCLA. But still, insane efficiency. It's just a matter of, like, can he do that at a bigger volume? And I think he can. That's why I rank him here. That's why I comp him to Harold Landry, who's received a large second contract in the NFL. And the Titans certainly missed him when he went down. Now, the third thing with him is he's going to turn 25 in his rookie season. So, honestly, if he was a 21-year-old and we were looking at this and like, God, I can't wait till he gets out of this system, it'd be a little bit more exciting. I mean, how could it not be? But still, man, you put him in an NFL structure in a 3-4 system where you can just play him off the edge and let him scream and burn. He can absolutely be a good number 2 edge player like Harold Landry. And then we get to my number 6 guy, and now we are into potential first-round picks, in my opinion, and that's going to actually start with Myles Murphy. And this is definitely about as low as you'll see with Myles Murphy, and a lot of this is I just really like the guys in this class. So he's a very interesting evaluation because when I got through his 2022 tape, I did 4 games, and that's about as much as I'll do on any non-quarterback as I do these evaluations because I was just trying so hard to see what all of this hype is about. This is a guy that has been projected inside the top 10. He's received Rashawn Gary comparisons, and I just wanted to see something that said, okay, yeah, he's a freak. He can do this. He has that power, rush, freaky athletic profile, and I just did not see it in the 4 games that I watched of him. And initially, I actually had a day 2 grade on Myles Murphy, and I just didn't get it. Now, I want to credit a couple people. James Foster put out a really nice cut-up of him from 2021, and it comes out that he potentially played through an injury in 2022. So you can see in 2021, he's got much more of that juice, that power profile, the Rashawn Gary comps. I can see where it comes from 2021. So that gets exciting, right? Mike Renner as well sent me a couple clips of flashes of power from 2022. After that, I revisited his game against Syracuse. And in the first half of that game, I think it was his best tape from 2022 that I've seen so far. So if you squint and look a little bit harder, you can definitely see the upside there. So I get it now. I'm more comfortable with that power profile in the first round than I was a few weeks ago, for sure. But I still want to say that his 22 was unimpressive. I walked out of that feeling the same exact way I felt about Boye Mafe last year, whose athletic upside, I think, got him overdrafted. And I love Boye Mafe. He grew up, like, down the street from where I'm living now. So, like, I root for Mafe, go Gophers, but I had him as a 3rd round guy. I thought the Seahawks way overdrafted him because his tape just didn't show that ability to utilize that athleticism for a dominating pass rush, just, you know, product on the field. So with Myles Murphy, he's quick, he's strong, he's big. Like, he's not a bad player in 2022, but there's no way that's a 1st round player. So it's just risky, man. Like, I do think you can take him in the 1st round, starting around the 20th pick, like Seattle. If they want another shot at a Boye Mafe type, I think I can get behind that. Anything earlier than that, though, I don't think this guy is what Rashawn Gary was coming out, which is the most common comparison you see for Myles Murphy. And you can check the receipts. I loved Rashawn Gary coming out. I had to make a video saying the hate had gone too far on him. I was one of the few people out here pounding the table for Rashawn Gary, and the year, what was it, 2 years after that on Gregory Rousseau. So, yeah, I think he can get there, but there's a chance if you take this guy, you're getting a low-end number 2 guy that just can't be that dominating player that you maybe drafted him to be. I do see the traits, for sure, in flashes, but the other thing with him is he's not a good run defender. Similar to what we said about Derek Hall, he doesn't finish plays in the backfield. He can get there, but the processing, he loses the ball. I was underwhelmed in that department as well. So I'd at least, like in Gregory Rousseau's case, for example, like I at least felt like he'd be a dominating run defender as he developed. I don't know if you're getting that in Myles Murphy, but again, the flashes in run defense are there. So he's just a very high risk, high reward player based on where he's supposed to go. And then at number 5, I have BJ Ajalari, actually just a slight bump ahead of Myles Murphy, and Ajalari might be the most fun highlight reel in this class because he is the complete football pass rushing textbook, in that if you named a pass rushing move, you can find BJ Ajalari at least trying it in college football as a true junior and probably winning with it. I mean, you name it: hop chop, swim move, rip, spin, ghost move, speed to bend, inside swipe, push and pull, bull rush, like all of it on display at LSU. And I got such a good laugh at the combine. He was talking about how his family is full of artists, but him and his brother Aziz aren't artists, they're athletes. And I'm like, dude, give yourself some credit, because the way you rush the passer, it's an art form. And he's painting all sorts of different strokes out there, you know? So he doesn't win with crazy efficiency. He's not a remarkable athlete. I think he's quick. Like he's kind of good in every department, not great. He's a little bit on the smaller side, 6'2", 250 pounds. He does have long arms, though, which really help him do all these different moves, because that arm length just helps, whether that's get inside leverage or to keep the blocker at arm's reach to pull some of these moves off. But like, I just don't see a world where BJ Ajalari isn't a technically sound number 2 rusher at the next level, who's only probably going to get better, because just like we talked about with Felix Uzama, it's one thing to have all these moves. It's another thing to know exactly when to go to them. And I think he's got a good baseline of that, but that is something that's probably only going to get better for a guy that clearly has good bloodlines and understands the game of football. So I do think he's someone that could go at the back end of the first. If he sneaks into the second, should not last long. Like, I think he's a top 35 to 40 player. One of those guys that when you get to day 2 of the draft, it's like, yeah, he doesn't last long at all. Kind of like Tyson Campbell comes to mind there. But yeah, really fun player to watch. He's not a great run defender. He can splash into the backfield and show some instincts there, but he's just not the heaviest guy. He struggles to hold his ground. Not the strongest arms to shed, but just a very complete pass rusher. And is going to probably settle in very quickly as a number 2 starter, just like his brother Aziz did, honestly. These guys are different players, but as far as their overall projection, it's pretty damn similar. And his comp to Jerry Hughes is one of my favorites in this class, who's just been that good number 2 guy for a long time. And then my number 4 edge player, Lucas Van Ness. Honestly, not a ton of time needs to be spent on him. I think everybody kind of agrees that he's a freaky athlete. 6'5", 275 pounds, long arms, great first step. He has dominating flashes of power. But the dude's barely played. He wasn't a full-time starter at Iowa because they're very stubborn about rewarding the veterans or the older classmen there with playing time. But it was very clear that he was their best pass rusher, the best player on that defensive line when he subbed in. And he still played a lot. It's not like he was only getting 10 snaps a game, right? Like, he wouldn't have declared if he didn't play well and the NFL wasn't saying, yeah, you're going to be a first-round pick. And with his traits, with the dominating flashes of power, I think you have to draft him there because the upside of a Rashawn Gary is there with someone like Lucas Van Ness. And I do think Iowa is one of those schools that you aren't supposed to scout the helmet, but there is something to be said about football players that go to Iowa City to play football. You have a passion for the game that is pretty much unquestioned if you're going to the middle of nowhere to play football. And I think it's produced constant numbers of pros in the NFL. So I think he gets a little bit of credit in that department. But, you know, I get it if you shy away from him because he hasn't produced and he has to develop not just alternative moves because all he wants to do is bull rush right now, but he's got to get even better with his first step, his hand placement. He's got to learn when it's appropriate to do a push and pull, to do a push and swim. Like, it's not just pure bull rush. You can't just run through everybody, but there is a track record of guys like this figuring it out at the next level. And you might say, why is he so much higher than Myles Murphy? Well, he's not. There's a small gap between these guys, but I do think we saw much more of those flashes of power last season from Van Ness than we did Myles Murphy. So he's a young guy. He's 21. Like, he is very much on the upward trajectory. He's a traits-based pick, just like Travon Walker was a traits-based pick with the #1 pick in last year's draft. So he's going to be someone that we're just going to have to kind of wait and see what he is at the next level, and is probably going to go in the top 15 of this draft. And I'm cool with it. I think he can reward teams for that investment. All right, next up, we got Nolan Smith out of Georgia taking the #3 spot. He did climb up a little bit from that combine performance. Not just the freaky athleticism. I think that matters. The guy ran a 4.39 and blew all of the other tests out of the water, but he actually impressed me the most by weighing in at 238. You know, he doesn't look the biggest on film, and he was listed at 235 at Georgia, which that's like, man, that is very much flirting with being too small. And a lot of these players end up weighing in less than what they're listed at in college. So to get up to 238, I think that's enough to play. 6'2", 238. It's an outlier. It's not ideal, but he plays strong. He's actually one of the best run defenders in this class because he plays with such natural leverage, and he's got strong arms. He's so quick to shed off blocks. People don't often talk enough about how foot speed and lateral agility is important in terms of block shedding, not just the ability to get your hands inside, stack and shed, which he's pretty good at that as well. But he's instinctive to knife into the backfield as well. He'll blow up plays and splash into the backfield. So he is a really good run defender. Now, sometimes athletic tackles are going to be able to get up inside him and drive him backwards, and that's just something you're going to have to live with. It's why, to me, he's a 3-4 fit through and through. If you put his hand in the dirt up close and personal with a lot of these NFL offensive linemen, you're going to get exposed a little bit, but you let him play in space where he can be a little bit more elusive and it's harder to get your hands inside this guy, he can absolutely defend the run. Now, as a pass rusher, he's honestly fantastic. On a per-snap basis, he's incredibly efficient. He's got the best first step in this class, and that was reinforced by his workout, right? What was a 1.49 10-yard split? I mean, that's better than most of the receivers in this draft, as was his 40-yard dash time. But he understands how to rush the passer. His best trait is going to be just using that get off and just bending around the edge, winning with that speed. And he's going to be able to do that at the next level, but he's got other ways to win as well. He actually has a decent bull rush. Again, force equals mass times acceleration, and he's got the best acceleration and speed in this class. So if he can get those hands inside, you're going to see a little bit of pop and a little bit of pushback. The biggest tackles are going to be able to lock him up, but it's enough to create a fear factor. And then you see him go to a ghost move because these guys get scared shirtless of him bullying them backwards in that bull rush because he's coming so fast. So he's got a lot of different ways to win. He's got excellent inside counters as well because of that threat with speed. The comp to Hassan Reddick is perfect, and I had that before Daniel Jeremiah put it out there, and he said it during the combine, and I'm like, yeah, I mean, we saw the same thing, man. Hassan Reddick was a top 5 to 8 pass rusher in the NFL last year at 6'1", 235. You look what Josh Uche did at 6'1", 240 for the Patriots. Nolan Smith can absolutely be a high-end pass rusher, a good run defender as well, and hell, you can drop him into coverage for these 3-4 systems as well. He's just fantastic. The biggest knock on him, other than the size, is going to be the injury concerns. He's had a hard time staying on the field, and that's something that teams are going to have to do their due diligence on, and I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little bit worried about that, but this guy should go in the top 20 of the draft, and I think he's going to be a fantastic pro. Super passionate guy, too. Love his football character. All right, Tyree Wilson, #2. Not a huge surprise, although there's swirling rumors that teams have Tyree Wilson as #1, which to me is just effing insane. But I do like Tyree Wilson. I think me talking about, oh, I didn't think Myles Murphy compared to Rashawn Gary. Well, I think Tyree Wilson absolutely does, and I think their grades are fairly similar for me. Wilson has 35-inch arms. He's 270 pounds. He's got a great first step. He lands those hands inside, and he's a violent bull rusher, a much more established one than Lucas Van Ness. Although these guys, athletically speaking, like if you really like Tyree Wilson, you're going to like Lucas Van Ness as well, so if you miss out on one, you can get the other. In most cases, it's going to be missing out on Tyree Wilson because he's going to go in the top 5 to 7 picks of this draft because of the upside. And I think he can get there. He certainly is not a perfect player. Right now, he is a straight line bull rusher, and a lot of people knock edge rushers for that, and I get it. You want to see a diverse skill set, but that is the most effective and efficient way to get to the quarterback, is on a straight line to him. And he can do that better than anybody in this class. And those physical traits will play at the next level. I promise you that. But again, just like we said with Lucas Van Ness, there is still a lot of growth to do with his pass rushing tool belt. Not necessarily like pulling off spin moves and swim moves. I don't need him to do that. But I want to see him take control of his blocker, win with some rip moves, maybe pull off a cross chop once or twice would be nice. Like, show off that power in other ways, and you're going to get a true number 1 rusher at the next level. Very much reminds me of Marcus Davenport, but maybe a little bit further along in his development and wouldn't have necessarily those health concerns. Marcus Davenport's about to get paid like $23 million in free agency, I think. So I don't think that's a knock on him, even if he's not a household name necessarily. But I do like Tyree Wilson. If he goes above Will Anderson, though, you're insane. Will Anderson, to me, right now is the second highest graded player in this entire draft class, and I love him. I think his best football, honestly, is only ahead of him because he had to play a lot of that stupid college football scheme stuff where he's playing as an inside shade, facing double teams at 255 pounds. Like, what are we doing here? Nick Saban's a genius, but come on, man. Just line him up there at least as a 5-tech, if not a 7-tech. Let him rush from a wide alignment and go to work, because when you put him out there and he can come from an angle and get a step to get that bull rush going, it's amazing the power that he can generate, considering he's not the biggest guy, but he checks all the boxes for me. He's got 34-inch arms, which is really good at his leverage. Almost an identical profile there to Derek Hall, actually. I mean, it's pretty crazy. They both went in. Derek Hall was 6'3", 253 with 34.5-inch arms. Will Anderson, slightly taller, 6'3.5", same weight, 253, and 34-inch arms. So while Will Anderson's really fluid, he's got bend, and I want to talk about those things. Make no doubt about it, he's a power rusher. Even if he projects better as a stand-up edge, he can do it either way. Even if he's only 253 pounds. It's almost identical, actually, watching Will Anderson play at Alabama and watching the recent years of Von Miller, where he doesn't have quite that elite athletic profile that prime Von Miller had, but he has a dominant bull rushing profile. And we saw what that Bills defense was without Von Miller once he went down. That is not a knock to say that Will Anderson is late career Von Miller. I think, honestly, if you put their tape back to back, you're going to see an identical player there. Now, like I said, he has a bend profile. You will see him rip and turn the corner. It's not elite bend, but it's very, very good. And then as far as a run defense profile, it was tough because a lot of the times he's having to put his hand in the dirt as a 4-eye and take on double teams from guards and tackles, and that's just freaking stupid. And even then, he held up okay in that role. Now, he gave up at times a lot of ground in those situations, as you would expect from him or Felix Uzama or Will McDonald or any of these poor souls that had to play that role in college football. But you put him out there as a stand-up edge or as a 7-tech and a wide 9 front, like, he's going to be just fine against the run. He's tough. He's got the strength. He's got the instincts. He's a willing run defender. So there's room to prove that he can be a great run defender, but I think he can get there. The only real thing is, like, I think there's room for him to develop even more pass rush moves. And that's pretty common, honestly, with these sort of blue chip guys, other than like Nick Bosa. I mean, Jadeveon Clowney, we said it about. I said it about Chase Young and Myles Garrett, where they just didn't have to win with a whole lot of like setting up inside-outside counters and spin moves and swim moves and all these fancy cross chops. And although Will Anderson does win with a cross chop occasionally, but, you know, like, there is room for him to broaden his pass rush tool belt, is all I'll say. And I think he can at the next level. He's a blue chipper to me. Should be a top 3 pick in the draft. I think he's going to be a low-end #1 rusher right out the gate. So, love Will Anderson. That's #1. Again, if you want my thoughts on anybody I didn't talk about here, most notably Keon White, but some other guys like Nick Herbig, Isaiah Foskey, Andre Carter, check out my Patreon. Patreon.com/thatfranchiseguy. You can get access to my draft board. Please do hit that like button on the way out. Drop a comment and subscribe. And that's all we got. We'll see you next week for some more draft content. Peace out.